Let me bring in my guests now. Jitendra Nath Misra is a former ambassador and professor at O.P. Jindal Global University. We have Ashok Sajjanhar, a former diplomat, and Raymond Vickery is a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce. Jitendra Nath Misra, beginning with you, sir. Our message is clear. Quad is here to stay, to assist, to partner, and to complement. While we look at the journey of Quad from its inception to now, certainly there is a lot of I would say, emphasis on deliverables, on areas of future.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, Maya, for this invitation. There are deliverables. Yes, of course, Quad is not a military alliance. It's a strong partnership between 4 countries who share strategic concerns mutually. Now, that's the first point. The second point is political. There was a question directed at US President Biden, is Quad going to survive November? Well, he put an arm around Prime Minister Modi and said it will be there for a long time. There is a bipartisan Quad caucus that has been announced in the United States, consisting of both the parties in both the houses. That itself is a political message, because there was some concern that because President Biden will not seek re-election and because Prime Minister Kishida is going to step down at the end of September, so what now for Quad? But Quad is not based on personalities. It's based on perceptions and common and mutual interests. Another additionality I'm glad to note is the vaccine initiative that was announced, I think, in the 2022 summit after COVID, that is US technology, Japanese funding, and Indian manufacturing for the common good of the Indo-Pacific. That really led nowhere. After the COVID crisis petered down, that initiative kind of petered out in a way. Nothing happened. But I'm very glad that there is the 40 million cancer vaccines proposal. And of course, India has to be at the center of that, because India is the center of vaccine manufacturing. So that's an additionality. The other thing is Coast Guard exercises. It's very important. So Quad is moving in from like-mindedness and from talk and declarations of intent to doing something actually on the ground. And as you know, the Coast Guards of the 3 other countries will be welcomed by the US. And so that's leading to some kind of joint operability, some kind of joint action, which is very important. And it's parallel to things like Malabar, but it's under the Quad initiative. Then, of course, the Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness, which was the great additionality in the past, concerning dark shipping and illegal fishing and things like that. That's going to be extended from the Indo-Pacific, which is a very vague kind of geographical concept, because some say it comes to the west of India and some say to the east coast of Africa. India says that the Indo-Pacific really is up to the eastern geography of the African coast. There was a different point of view coming from the United States in the past because of the issues between the Central Command and the Pacific Command, which is that the Indo-Pacific ends at the western coast of India. So that's going to now extend to the Indian Ocean explicitly. So that's another, conceptually, it's a breakthrough because it defines the geographies in a clearer way. But having said all that, Quad is still a partnership. It's not an alliance. It's not a substitute for AUKUS. As Minister Jaishankar had said a few years ago, they are different. And they will be different, and the focus will be different. But Quad, I'm sure, is here to stay,
yes,
as long as Chinese aggressive behavior continues. Thank you.
And Raymond Vickery, would you also say that there is also a reimagination of what it started with to now, when it looks at its own growth? There is this sense that there is a need for cooperation in healthcare. That's something that has been announced with regards to the Moonshot, that one world, one health, as Prime Minister Modi announced, and Quad Cancer Moonshot. That's that was the event where he participated, and that sense that how Quad is significant for the human race, that it's not just for nations, it's for its people.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, and thanks very much for having me. It seems to me this has been a most remarkable day in U.S.-India relations, and perhaps more importantly, in relations among the great democracies of the Indo-Pacific. The whole idea of the Quad was to provide a way for India to cooperate with other leading democracies in the Indo-Pacific. After all, without India, there's no Indo in Indo-Pacific. It's just Pacific. That, it seems to me, is succeeding, and it has gone from its inception to just something to be responsive to natural disasters into really a full-fledged partnership with due regard to the sensibilities, particularly of India, of not having being in a military alliance. But even there, you can see that there is cooperation. When you're talking about maritime domain and information about where ships are going, and you talk about Coast Guard being involved, the Coast Guards of all four nations. When you have an Operation Malabar of the same four nations that admittedly is not directly a part of Quad, it is plain that what is going on here is that India is entering fully into the security architecture to try to build peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific in the face of an authoritarian threat, which is as much to India as it is to any other country. I would also point out, following up on the joint statement between the two leaders, between President Biden and Prime Minister Modi, there's a lot of meat in there in regard to semiconductors, not only in the investment in a fabrication plant, but the coordination of production so that we're not competitive but cooperative. It even goes so far as to one of Prime Minister Modi's favorite themes, and that is building employment. We're talking about Ford auto parts. So I think it's across the board, and it's very significant.
Absolutely, and we are playing out those visuals, in fact, which shows that 297 antiquities will be heading home. Ambassador Sajjanar, good to see you this morning. So thank you for your time here on NDTV. Before I ask you a question, let's play that crucial question that was asked by the journalists who had gathered outside President Joe Biden's home. When question was asked, who will take forward and what really is the future of Quad? Listen in to what he said. That in just a bit, but that very important gesture, Ambassador Sajjanar. Okay, let's listen into that.
Your Excellencies, Rashtrapati Biden, Pradhan Mantri Kishida और प्रधानमंत्री अल्बनीसी, मेरे तीसरे कार्यकाल के शुरुआत में ही आज क्वाड समिट में मित्रों के साथ भाग लेते हुए मुझे बहुत खुशी हो रही है। क्वाड की 20वीं वर्षगांठ को मनाने के लिए राष्ट्रपति बाइडेन ने अपने शहर विल्मिंगटन से बेहतर जगह नहीं हो सकती। एमट्रेक जो के रूप में आप जिस प्रकार से इस शहर और डेलावेयर से जुड़े रहे हैं, कुछ वैसा ही रिश्ता आपका क्वाड से भी रहा है। आपके नेतृत्व में 2021 में पहली समिट का आयोजन किया गया और इतने कम समय में हमने अपने सहयोग को हर दिशा में अभूतपूर्व तरीके से बढ़ाया है। इसमें व्यक्तिगत रूप से आपकी बहुत महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका रही है। मैं क्वाड के लिए आपकी दृढ़ प्रतिबद्धता, आपके नेतृत्व और आपके योगदान के लिए आपको हृदय से धन्यवाद देता हूं। फ्रेंड्स, हमारी बैठक ऐसे समय हो रही है जब विश्व तनावों और संघर्षों से घिरा हुआ है। ऐसे में साझा डेमोक्रेटिक वैल्यूज के आधार पर क्वाड का मिलकर साथ चलना पूरी मानवता के लिए बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है। हम किसी के खिलाफ नहीं हैं। हम सभी एक रूल्स बेस्ड इंटरनेशनल ऑर्डर, संप्रभुता और क्षेत्रीय अखंडता के सम्मान और सभी मसलों के शांतिपूर्ण ढंग से हल निकालने का समर्थन करते हैं। फ्री, ओपन, इंक्लूसिव और प्रॉस्परस इंडो पैसिफिक हमारी साझा प्राथमिकता और साझा प्रतिबद्धता है। हमने मिलकर हेल्थ सिक्योरिटी, क्रिटिकल एंड इमर्जिंग टेक्नोलॉजीज, क्लाइमेट चेंज, कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग जैसे क्षेत्रों में कई सकारात्मक और समावेशी इनिशिएटिव लिए हैं। हमारा मैसेज साफ है, क्वाड is here to stay, to assist, to partner and to complement. मैं एक बार फिर राष्ट्रपति बाइडेन और सभी साथियों का अभिवादन करता हूं। 2025 में क्वाड लीडर्स समिट का आयोजन भारत में करने में हमें खुशी होगी। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Will the Quad survive beyond the election in November?
What survive?
The Quad, will it survive regardless of the outcome?
Way beyond November.
Mr President, will the Quad survive beyond the election in November?
What survive?
The Quad, will it survive regardless of the outcome?
Beyond November. Way beyond November.
An important gesture there by President Joe Biden, talking about the future of Quad as Ambassador Misra was pointing out. Ambassador Sajjanar, thank you so much. Your thoughts on this? Of course, we have discussed the Quad Cancer Moonshot and also the first ever Quad at Sea ship observer mission in 2025. There are a lot of logistical network support that has been highlighted, projects of future as well.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maria. Always a pleasure to be with you. Let me, try to respond to this question that was posed and what you have also mentioned. When the Quad, the revival of the Quad took place in November of 2017 on the margins of the East Asia Summit in Manila, Philippines, you would have noticed that at that time, the doubters and the naysayers, particularly China, the Chinese foreign minister had said that it's like a bubble in the sea. It's like froth and it is going to disappear very quickly. It is not going to stay. But then we have seen that from 2017 till about 2020, it moved along at a slow pace. But truly, since March 2021, after President Biden took over in January of that year, and in March, the first virtual summit was held. And over the last 3.5 years, we have had 6 summits of the Quad, 4 of them being in person. And I think the rise of the Quad has been truly meteoric. And, now China or any of the other countries don't make this comment that the Quad is going to disappear. But I think the question, Maria, came in because if there is a change of guard in the White House, and if the presidency were to move in the other direction, then we have seen what happened in 2017 when Mr. Donald Trump came in. And he basically sidelined all the initiatives that had been taken, significant initiatives, not all, several, most of them, initiatives that had been taken by President Obama, whether it is the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, whether it is the Paris Accord, whether it is the reconciliation with Iran, even on the domestic front. One initiative, of course, that he did not sideline was relations with India. Relations with India were growing since Clinton's visit in March 2000, and they have continued to grow. So I think the question here was, whether anyone who comes after Mr. Biden, if it is Mr. Trump, he also might push this to the side. But again, my own assessment is that if Shinzo Abe can be seen as the one who really started this whole concept of the Indo-Pacific and the Quad, Donald Trump can really be seen as the person who revived it in 2017. Of course, the contribution of President Joe Biden is enormous because he brought it to the summit level. The first summit was held under his leadership, and then it has continued to grow in terms of expansion of its scope, expansion of its mandate. And rather than being limited to being a purely security grouping, it has truly evolved as a force for global good. And so I think what we are seeing in terms of what you have mentioned and what the other panelists have also mentioned as to the expansion of the spectrum of activities of the Quad, that is very impressive. And I think definitely it has a very huge contribution to make to peace, stability, security, and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific.
Okay.
Maria.
Okay. We are getting those visuals now coming in from New York, where Prime Minister Modi has reached New York now, and there will be an important diaspora meeting. That interaction becomes important. Raymond Vickery, your thought particularly on the future of Quad. Of course, the indication or gesturing by President Joe Biden speaks volumes about it. But if there is a change of regime, of course, Kamala Harris will ensure continuity. But what about Donald Trump?
Well, I think that's a very good question. But as has just been said, even though the former President Trump has been very erratic, it's going to be very difficult for him to say the Quad shouldn't go forward when it was revived, at least on the ministerial level, during his watch. And I think there's no question, though, that one of the emphases here of President Biden is to try to institutionalize this Quad relationship as much as possible, so that it is so embedded in the security architecture for the entire Indo-Pacific region in so many areas that even a person who is as erratic as the former president will find it extremely difficult to disown it. So I think that that's a subtext here. And I want to say again about how remarkable this is in terms of timing and scope. The joint statement doesn't just stop at Indo-Pacific. It covers Ukraine, it covers Gaza, it covers the South China Sea in very explicit detail, North Korea. There have been many of us who've advocated that the United States and India particularly should join together to drive peace and prosperity throughout the world. UN reform is on the anvil. All of these things need to be done. And I think that Prime Minister Modi is to be congratulated for seizing the moment. And one can only hope that it is not something which will show any lacking, because the hour is late and the need is great if you look across the world to build peace and prosperity. And the great democracies are in an ideal position to try to do that, to prevent us from going down the trail to war, nuclear war, and what mankind has done in the past.
Ambassador Mishra, coming to you now. Of course, as Ambassador Sajanhar was pointing out about the clear messaging that is coming, it's no longer a talk shop. It has walked quite a bit, and all these leaders, the four heads of countries, are in agreement on multiple issues, particularly about the Indo-Pacific. But, in terms of their ideas of democracy, the shared values, and looking at concrete achievements, and the journey from just having strategic partnership to now where they talk about the larger humanity?
Well, I don't give a lot of importance to things like shared values in foreign affairs and interstate relations. These create a good atmosphere, a feel-good kind of atmosphere. But in actual statecraft, it is the core issues and the hard issues of security and strategic issues that take center stage. I would just like to add something to the big question: will Quad survive November? And there seems to be a consensus very clearly amongst all of us that it will, and the reasons have been given. But I don't think it's based on personalities so much as interests. And as long as Chinese behavior at the present level of assertiveness, even aggressiveness in the South China Sea, Taiwan, Japan, and of course India continues, and economic coercion of Australia, it has subsided somewhat. And the differences, of course, with the United States, the structural differences. As long as these things continue, there is a common interest among all the 4 countries of the Quad to be together and to act together. And China is the unwritten part of the script. Nobody talks about China in name. It's very much there. But on the other hand, what could take Quad in a different direction is if there is a reset of relations between the United States and China on the one hand, between India and China on the one hand, and on the other hand, and thirdly, also between Australia and China. And in all 3 cases, there seems to be some movement towards some degree of accommodation. There's been, of course, meetings, visits by the US National Security Advisor and Secretary of State to China, and India and China are now talking more seriously about trying to contain the border standoff and to reverse it in some way in the remaining areas. And Australia, on the trade front, there seems to be some kind of accommodation. So if the China problem subsides and becomes less intense in terms of Chinese aggressive behavior, then of course we don't know where Quad will go, because India has already succeeded in persuading the 3 partners that Quad need not and should not be a security forum, and that's why AUKUS came into being. Because Quad was not making a movement in that direction. And India has also steered it towards the Indo part, as we heard, of the Indo-Pacific. So that's the success of Indian diplomacy. But on the other hand, we are talking about things like Gaza and Ukraine, and of course the vaccine initiative and other things. And the Indo-Pacific maritime domain awareness, which is very, very important, the most important. I have spoken about the other things. So we really don't know what Quad will look like in the next 2 or 3 years. It'll depend to a great degree on Chinese behavior.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Raymond Vikri, Ashok Sajanhar, and Jitendra Nath Misra.